Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Coach Corner. I am your host, Dej. Today I am here with Allison McDonald. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Dej. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. It was such a nice day out today. I got to enjoy it with my daughter, which was fun.
I know the spring is springing now. I'm
Yeah,
I'm excited.
finally.
Yes, finally. So I'm super excited about today's episode because we're talking about a very hot topic, Gestalt language processing. And this is gonna be a like three podcasts all about it. And Allison's gonna kick us off. So I will go right into her bio so that we can get to all the great questions. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Awesome. So, Allison McDonald is a neurodiversity affirming therapist with a child led therapy approach. Allison is trained in the natural language acquisition, NLA for short, framework, and Gestalt language processing. She is passionate about empowering and educating caregivers to best support their child's language development. She is also the co founder of Small Talk Therapeutic Services. Small Talk provides home based treatment with a child led and strength based approach in the local Philadelphia and Baltimore areas. Their team consists of neurodiversity affirming clinicians with extensive experience in childhood development. They've also developed language playgroups for ages 6 to 36 months. During these classes, they educate parents about the power of play and that teaching language can be simple and happen during daily routines. I love that you all do play groups like from super young, 6 months.
Yes, yes. It's
That's
been
awesome.
it's been really fun. Definitely challenging figuring out like how do we get a 6-month-old and like a 3-year-old to kind of be doing similar activities, but it's really fun to see the kids interact together and the parents come away with some great strategies. So it's been great.
Yeah, and so tell everyone a little bit about small talk and kind of how it's three of you all and all of that.
Yeah, so I've been a speech therapist for like 7 years now, and I've always been working mostly in that early intervention age range. And as I was, recently learning more about neurodiversity affirming practices
Mm-hmm.
and, that child led approach, I found myself with my two really good friends working towards okay, we are very like minded. We feel like we can create something that's really special. And we decided to create Small Talk.
Love that.
It's been fun. It's almost been 2 years. We all recently just had babies, like within 3 months of each other, which is just hilarious. So that's been interesting to navigate, but really fun.
Like small talk babies.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's what we call them, Small Talk babes.
So, what does a typical day look like for you?
So it's a lot of moving around, a lot of time in the car. I call my car like my office.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing kids in the school setting. I'm seeing them in, their home. A lot of my kids on my caseload are autistic and
Mm-hmm.
Gestalt language processors, who also are using like speech generating devices to support their communication.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of detective work with my Gestalt language processors, watching tons of YouTube clips with them, which is pretty fun. Uh, and then, the other side of it is being that business owner and like just doing like the behind the scenes, like social media or all the fun QuickBooks and finance stuff. So it's a good combo of the two.
I totally understand that. It's not that fun
Nope.
when you think about all the little things that you have to do, but the reward is greater than all those little tasks.
Exactly.
So, can you kind of tell me about? So, okay, we know that Gestalt language processing is not necessarily new, but
Hmm.
kind of new to the masses, right? Like, it's kind
Yeah.
of a new concept for everyone to be learning. Like, oh my gosh, there's another way to process language. And so, like, how did you like market that to families and say, like, I'm like, we are your go to place for this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think how you just explained it, like it's new to the masses. I love that. I'm gonna steal that because I feel like it's a good way to describe it. I'm always like, it's not new, but it's new to everybody else. But I like how you said it. Um, we have just done a lot through our social media of trying to
Mhm.
educate parents and caregivers about what Gestalt language processing is. we've tried to bring it up in all of our sessions
Mhm.
if we're seeing those characteristics. It is hard. It's a hard and a newer
Yeah.
concept for everyone. So I feel like it's challenging for caregivers to like unlearn what they might have
Yeah.
thought or might have been taught by maybe another provider, and then relearn this new way of targeting their child's language development.
For sure, especially because, they're looking at these milestones and going to their pediatricians and hearing one
Yeah.
thing that is still very much based in how we all thought about language before all this became
Mhm.
more, available to the masses. And so, yeah, I feel like you guys are like on the front lines of all of this.
We're trying. We're trying. We definitely. So probably like a couple years ago, I learned about Gestalt language processing
Hmm.
through social media, and
Right.
then I was able to dive deeper into Marge Blanc and her research and
Hmm.
her book, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is making so much sense. Like these traditional speech therapy approaches were not working. Like
Yep.
I was doing all the things I was taught in grad school, and we weren't making any progress, and it was frustrating for
Hmm.
me, for the caregivers. And then when I found this other way and I learned more of these strategies and these things that have really just been able to help all of my learners flourish, it was like a
Yeah.
game changer.
Yeah, I remember being in graduate school, like early into my graduate school, and I was working in this like multidisciplinary clinic, and ABA was a part of it. And I remember having a client who had a lot of different scripts, and I
Mm,
kept researching like what do these scripts mean? I was like researching
yeah.
because the normal way that I learned speech was not like how like they were gravitating to it, right? And
Yeah.
so I remember finding Marge Blanc's research and being
Mhm.
like, this makes sense. Like, but and
Mhm.
then that's when like the meaningful speech courses, like I started to
Yeah.
find all of that and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, people are talking about this. So I
Yeah.
have not taken any courses, and so I'm so excited to get kind of the bare bones kind of outline of what to know about GLPs in this episode. So tell for myself and my listeners, kind of
Mhm.
define Gestalt language processing or GLPs, and then what that like the NLA framework is like. Is that synonymous? Is it not? Like, tell us all about that.
Okay. Very confusing. I feel like there's been people just like interchanging
Yeah.
GLP and LA, and they're a little bit different. So,
Okay.
Gestalt language processing is the way that a child is processing language. It's not wrong, it's just different, and it's like the lesser known way of
Mm-hmm.
developing language. And then the natural language acquisition framework, that's what we use to assess, to
Mm-hmm.
support, to evaluate our GLPs. So the
Gotcha.
NLA is more like the therapy aspect of it, and the GLP is how they're developing language.
Gotcha. That makes so much sense. Thank you for breaking that down.
Yeah,
So so what kind of led you to like diving deeper into it? So you said that you were having kids that like me, I didn't know what necessarily what to do with them. Everything I was
yeah.
learning in graduate school was not sticking. Was that kind of like what made you dive deeper into it and like take courses and et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I had a lot of so a lot of my work has been in that early intervention and then like
Hmm.
a little bit of the early school age. So I was getting these kids fresh and we were trying to, oh, maybe they're a late talker and then we're seeing characteristics of autism. Okay, like let's try to figure this out. These traditional approaches aren't working. And then it was like, okay, I need to
Yeah.
do something about this because my a lot of my caseload seems to be using this delayed echolalia or immediate
Hmm.
echolalia. How can I support this? And then
Right.
once I learned the strategies and like really incorporating, I know you mentioned you have a episode about AAC and GLPs.
Hmm.
That was a game changer too. Like them being
Yeah.
able to have that support and communication and like also maybe access some of their YouTube clips at the same time has just been really cool.
I just feel so good about the future and like how
Mhm.
many kids will be so well equipped and so many families will be well supported with more SLPs getting this knowledge, right? Like I'm just so excited about
Yeah.
that. But I'm also like sad
I
that like we didn't like have this
I
sooner.
know. I know. I think about that. I'll like think back to certain, clients that I had,
Mhm.
and I'm like, oh, if only I knew what I know now then, like it could have been so different. But just need to move forward, and we're all learning, and we're just doing
Yes.
it again.
Yes, I love that perspective. So,
Yeah.
okay, let's just dive right in. So, like, walk us through like an initial intake call. Like you said, you have to do a lot of education and things with
Yeah.
caregivers. So, walk us through kind of what that initial intake call with a caregiver for a GLP or what you suspect a GLP to kind of look like, and then let's just start there because I have a lot of
Okay.
questions. Let's just start with the intake call.
Usually we will just try to figure out as much as we can about our learner. Like, okay, what are their interests? What are some scripts that you might already be hearing? What are, media that they enjoy? So we'll just
Mhm.
ask the parent about like their preferences and just try to get like a total picture of the child. We
Mhm.
also want to make sure that the family is aware of like that strength-based approach and child-led therapy and
I
making
love
sure that
that.
our values are going to align, because if they're not, then it's just not going to be a good mix for either one of us. So we try to also make sure that that's known as well during our
Yeah.
intake call. And then if we are a match, we just like move forward with either, evaluation, or if they've had a recent evaluation, we'll just kind of start directly with services.
Awesome, awesome. Okay. I love how you kind of screen, like
Yeah, exactly.
your families and cuz that is such a hard thing to get through, like that barrier of I think people call it attitude barriers, like, like I want therapy to look a certain way and can
Yeah,
you fix my kid or can
yeah.
and I think people are well-meaning. Like, I
Mhm.
think they're well-meaning, but if that's just not your style, there's probably a more traditional therapists out there that can kind of give them what they're looking for or whatever. So I love that you kind of screen it because ultimately it's going to be what's best for the family.
Yeah,
So then okay, so that's the intake call. Kind of walk us through what that evaluation and treatment process looks like because there's no formalized anything out there for GLPs. I
right,
mean, we have the framework,
right.
but from what I know, you're kind of going in and out of that framework based on the child and where they're at. So, yeah, kind
Yeah.
of walk us through that.
Yeah, so then, in our initial sessions, it's going to look a lot like observation, parent questionnaires, just parent report of like how the child's communicating, and then tons of language samples.
Okay.
So if the child is speaking, we'll be taking those language samples. If they have AAC, we'll be using that as a way to take a language sample. Or, okay, what is their current form of communication? They're using lots of gestures, they're hand leading,
Hmm.
and that will help us determine what stage they're in. And we often will take language samples over multiple sessions because maybe that
Mm,
day isn't the best day for them, or they just
right.
met us and we're a new person. So we'll try to make sure that before we determine what our therapy goals are going to be, we'll like really take a couple of those language samples in the beginning to help us figure out what will work best.
Gotcha. Okay. So, how does this, and you don't have to go deep into this, but I'm just curious, how does this work with like insurance? Or is this mostly like it's hard, like we kind of have to start out private pay, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so it is definitely, I think, a little bit harder in that insurance side. We
Mm-hmm.
mostly do like we can provide services through private pay, through like HSA,
Oh,
FSA.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those have been helpful. And then families have actually had a lot of success submitting super bills. So we'll
Yeah.
provide them with a super bill and they could submit that to insurance. But I do think it's something newer, like you said, to the
Yeah.
masses. So it might be a little bit harder for like insurance or what they've seen before for reimbursement purposes.
Yeah, because we know that those formalized tests aren't always going to tell us really anything.
I know,
So,
exactly.
yeah, I can totally see why private pay would kind of just be a better model so that you can do
Yeah,
those like continuous forms of evaluation.
yeah.
So, okay, based on like, so say you found out now, and mind you, I don't know anything. Like, say that you think that they're stage one. Like,
Hmm.
so is there kind of like a what to do in stage one treatment process or what
Yeah,
to do in stage two? Like, you know what I'm trying to say?
for sure. And we could even step back a second because I didn't mention the
Hmm.
characteristics of determining if a child's a Gestalt language.
Oh, here we go.
So yeah, so this is the good stuff. So typically, what we'll see with a Gestalt language processor is maybe they're using like really long strings of unintelligible speech. People call it
Hmm.
jargon, but this is probably maybe a script that they've taken and it really has meaning to it. We just don't know what it is yet.
Mm,
Uh, Maybe we're hearing rich intonation. Maybe they're really musical. A lot of GLPs gravitate towards music. Maybe they're singing and humming songs, but then they're not like using words to make a request or to comment.
yeah.
Um, will oftentimes autistic children are Gestalt language processors. I think the research has said like 75 to 90% of
Wow.
autistic children are GLPs. So like knowing about any diagnoses or about their history is really helpful in us
Hmm.
identifying, how they're learning language. And then, of course, the big one, like, are you hearing lots of scripts? Are you hearing scripts that might be from a preferred show, a movie? All of those clues kind of help us determine if they're a Gestalt language processor. Oftentimes, a lot of families are coming to us and they're like, I think that they're a GLP, and these families have been doing a great job of figuring out the
Yeah.
characteristics, checking it off. Okay, I think they're a GLP, and we were having traditional speech therapy and that was not working. That's also an
Hmm.
indicator of like, okay, we need to do something different. So once we determine they're a GLP, often, like most kids I say on my caseload are in those earlier stages of GLP. I have a couple that are later stages that made it to the later stages on their own without
Hmm.
intervention. But those, stage ones, what we're going to do is say, okay, let's see what areas they might still need support in communicating. Oh, they're
Mm.
really good at commenting. Like they see something and they took a script amazing from a show, and so they start being like amazing and they're using these comments, but maybe they're not protesting or
Mm.
advocating for themselves. So we want to try to just very naturally model those types of communicative intents in those moments when it feels appropriate. um,
Yeah.
Often we'll try to model using like phrases that start with it's or let's or we. So it's from joint perspective, so there's not that
Hmm.
confusion with the pronouns. So what
Right.
we think we can say, or from their perspective, like I'm so excited. So that
Mm.
again, if they repeat it back, it just feels really natural.
Yeah. This sounds so like invigorating. Like
Yeah.
I'm imagining like a session and just like really being able to be super child led. Like, we
Yeah.
say that like all day long, but like, in the wild, it gets hard,
Yeah.
to maintain like all these different strategies, the things we learn in grad school, and then be like,
Mhm.
okay, wait, let me go back to being child led. Like I'm not being child
Yeah.
led. Like let me,
Yeah.
remind myself of that. But this just seems like it just really gives into that child led approach. And I love that.
Yeah.
So was this kind of hard at first? Like, did you need like the NLA framework like taped on the wall to like help you?
Yes. So Bridget and Sylvia and we talk about this all the time. How we first learned about it a couple of years ago, and we were like, we have no idea what this is. Like, let's dive in, let's figure this out. And then all of a sudden, we felt so confident, and we're like, yeah, we know all about this. All these stages, we got this. And then you learn something new, or you hear something
Hmm.
else, and another way of thinking about Gestalt language processing, and you're just like, oh my god, I need to start from the beginning. So there's always like this like up and down of like, okay, I feel confident with it. Nope, I need to go back to learning more. Now I feel
Yep.
good about it. Oh, I'm not that expert that I thought I was. So it's just like continuous learning. Um,
So
but,
So tell me about the language samples a little bit. So
mhm.
does it look like your typical what we learned in graduate school, or like how does all that go? Or is it more of the analysis is a lot different?
The analysis is a lot different. So say I have this new child on my caseload who
Mhm.
we always try to join in on their special interests or what they would want
Yeah.
to be engaged with, and he is like the biggest sports fan, which has been a challenge for me because I am not the biggest sports person. But so I was taking a language sample as he was showing me like some of the clips from basketball games that he really liked over the weekend, and so
Mhm.
he was telling me all about them, and I was just like recording it. Usually I can't do it like live. I need to record it and then
Yeah.
like go back to it. So I like record it on my phone, and then I've actually figured out the super simple way of uploading your audio
I
files
saw that on
to Microsoft.
Instagram.
Oh my God, that was huge for me. I was like, okay, now I don't have to sit here typing it all out. Um,
Mhm.
so I put it on there, and then we analyze it. That's why you also need a couple of language samples to figure out like, oh, is this a gestalt that they're using the same way every time? Oh, I did see
Mm.
it these three times the same way. Okay, this is a stage one. Oh,
Yeah.
look, they mitigated it. They mix and matched it. So instead of just like, it's so fun, it became it's blue. And so now they're mixing and matching it. That's stage two. And so it's just like analyzing and deciding what each stage um, that their utterance is in, and
Gotcha.
then okay, where are they in like the 50% of their utterances are in this stage, then we can move on to the next one.
Gotcha. And I know I see I know I'm going off the cuff here. I'm just like
No, you're
so
good.
like I'm so into this. So, okay, I've seen a lot of things floating on the gram about
Yeah.
like okay, so just what am I asking? So, do you like graduate at stage I think is the last one like stage 6, I think?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
is that like like what does that you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes. So I have I feel like there's been some kids that are Gestalt language processors that just like go through it really quickly on their own
Mhm.
and don't need supports. The ones that we're seeing are obviously the ones that might be stuck in a stage and then they need that
Mm.
support to get to that self generated language. That's always the goal, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, you're using this script because it has such emotion and meaning for you. How can we get you to be able to express this on your own with your own language?
Mhm.
So that's stage six, is basically like you've gotten to self generated language, you've gone through the grammar and all of that.
Gotcha.
Now, some kids will get towards those later stages and they might not even need your support anymore. They're just naturally going through that those grammar and understanding
Mhm.
of language and language processing, and then they don't need you anymore.
Right.
Um, most of my kids are on the earlier stages, so we need to work towards more of that self-generated and that grammar aspect, which is the stage 4, 5, and 6.
Right. I remember, I don't remember who I was talking to, but they kept saying, like, Dave, stop thinking so black and white. Like, when you are with a kid who is like like has a language process like GLP, like
Mm-hmm.
you got to be flexible. Like there's no
Yeah,
like right or wrong, there's no black or white like how we were taught in
I
graduate
know.
school. This was like oh, I remember it was like in the very beginning of like working with autistic kids and like being on my own because when I got into my clinical fellow, I was in an intensive, structured room. I'd never worked with these
Mm-hmm.
kiddos. That's when I started researching so much about
Yeah,
GLP. And like, I was like, oh my gosh. And she was like, you just got to be flexible. Like, you know, like it's not black and
yeah,
white how they teach us in graduate school.
I know. It's so
Oh,
different. I feel
it's
like
so different.
yes, it's like yeah, in grad school you're sitting at a table and you had
Yep.
all these things planned, and now I never plan ever. Like
Yes.
I have ideas of like what I would think that they would like and how I can manipulate it or encourage it to be like our targets, but I'm never like, here's the worksheet that we're gonna do today. It just
Yes.
we just join in their
And I,
interests what they're about.
Yes, and I was always praised for being super child-led in graduate school. And I'm like, I was absolutely not child-led in graduate school. Like what? But, you know, as that's why I love Instagram. Like I just feel like we are really growing our definition of therapy and like what it looks like. And I know a lot of like more seasoned SLPs say that they love being able to now see what everyone else is doing. Like they didn't have that when they were coming up. And like I love it so much. So
Yeah.
as you know, I feel like I could talk about just GLP all day long. But as you know, this podcast is all about collaboration. And so
Mhm.
with kiddos who are GLPs, I'm like assuming there's so much collaboration involved. So tell me about like how you have collaborated with like other professionals, so like PTOT and like parents and
Mhm.
caregivers, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It definitely starts with the caregiver and like providing them with as much education as possible. And once
Mhm.
we feel like they have a, greater understanding about Gestalt language processing, they're able to be such a great source of
Mhm.
information. Like, what is your child like? What are their preferences? Oh, where do you think the source of this Gestalt is coming from? They're saying this. And I'm telling you, they save me so much time, parents, because they're like, oh, yeah, they were watching this the other day, and this is probably where it came from. And
Mm-hmm.
then they can really help be a part of that team. We also work a lot with a child led ABA company
Mm-hmm.
who has just taught us so much about, social emotional development, co regulation. So we love collaborating with them. But it's so important for, we're only there an hour or two a week. So, like,
Yeah.
we need to make sure that everyone on the team is on the same page so that we can, help support this child and, encourage that success and that progress as fast as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And I love that you're working with other like neurodiversity affirming clinicians. And I just love that that's becoming like more the norm, you know? Like I feel like every clinician that I meet now
Yeah.
at least is like beginning their journey on that, or like they like are so far into it and they're just like embracing it. And I love that. Were you always comfortable
Mhm.
collaborating across fields with all these different, professionals, et cetera, et cetera?
Definitely not. I feel like in the very beginning I started, I was like, I need to make sure I know what I'm talking about before
Yep.
I feel like I could then share my thoughts and strategies. I definitely always was like excited to learn from other people, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel like I might not have had that knowledge yet to share with them.
Yep.
So it's been nice to have built more of that confidence and knowledge base.
And isn't it crazy because like the moment you open your mouth, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that." Like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, you're so amazing." And you're like, "Oh my gosh, if I just would have said what was on my mind." Like
Right, right, right.
because,
We'll be doing
language exactly. Language is in everything and it's so vital, and so I definitely get that. What discipline do you collaborate with most? Would it be the child-led ABA therapist?
yeah, it would definitely be them. And then like from caregiver perspective, it's like teachers,
Mhm.
parents, because we're in those school settings in the home environment so much that we're always trying to really coach them and provide them with all the information and strategies that they can implement too. We'd love to work, with some OTs, like some more
Yeah.
neurodiversity affirming OTs that can give us that like co-regulation strategies from more of the sensory perspective.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're like looking forward to developing more relationships with. But I'd say, professionally wise, it's mostly that ABA therapy company.
Gotcha. And then so are you going into schools or is it more like coaching from the outside?
We go in. So we go into daycares or we go into school
Oh, love
settings.
that.
Yeah. So, and usually our model, we like to push in as much as possible
Mhm.
because that's natural for the child. That's their
Yeah,
natural environment. So we can help support, maybe them when they're talking with a friend or trying to communicate with a teacher. And then the teachers can
right.
see what we're doing. So we really like to be in it and be able
Yeah.
to help as much as possible.
I love that. So, what are some of your go-to like materials or games or just resources for people who just like are like me, like are just learning about GLP and all that kind of stuff?
I'd say a lot of times I'm just diving into the child's preferences. So
Yeah.
usually I'm stepping back and like observing, and it feels so uncomfortable. Like we're so taught to be like immediately go in there and
Yeah.
help and teach something. So it's very hard for me to like sit back and just observe and like really watch and see what they're interested in. And then from there I can try to pick out some activities that I feel like would support those interests. A lot of the kids who might not, yet be interested in toy play will do some like gross motor stuff. So like
Mm.
I have so many kids who love a blanket swing, which is so easy. Like you just need two people and a blanket, and kids love it. And it helps
Yeah.
regulate the sensory system. So I've done that. I've done like playing chase with them. Um, and then like just those special interests. I have kids who love letters. So like
Mhm.
Chicka Chicka Boom Boom is like a fan favorite, or like
Mhm.
writing out letters is really exciting for them. Numbers is a hit, so like number blocks. For my later stage GLPs, I've been like really getting into Canva with them, and that's been super fun. Like we'll make
Oh.
these about their weekend, and we'll have pictures on it and stuff. So that's been really fun.
I think I also saw that on your Instagram. I just love how like you show everyone the tips and the tricks. So, like I said, this is really not well, it's growing to the masses, right? So I'm
Hmm.
sure you've run into one or two like stakeholders, whether that be parent or caregiver, teacher, another professional, who are like, okay, this is a bunch of woo woo. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What is that? How do you kind of deal with that?
We definitely get a lot of that. Or I feel like we got a lot more of that, like, maybe a year ago. Now
Yeah.
I feel like it's more understood a little bit more.
Hmm.
So oftentimes we'll just give them resources like, check out this social media account. And sometimes it's just like not coming from you. It could
Yeah.
be just better received. So I'll share social media accounts, I'll share like videos. And then sometimes it's like just showing them, like you modeling the strategy and then them being like, oh my God, that worked. Oh, now I get
Right.
it. Then just like action and showing them has been effective too.
Yeah, and just like keep showing up and like
Yeah.
believing in what you're doing. That confidence that you were talking about earlier, I think also goes a really long way with anything that you're implementing that might be new to people. What has been your like biggest lesson about collaboration, especially when it comes to something like working with GLPs where you really need everyone on board and kind of understanding what has been like your biggest lesson about that?
Just to like listen to other providers or caregivers and just hear them out. And then
Hmm.
if we can have this open discussion, I feel like we all can feel heard and then be able to kind of move forward
Yeah.
with like what's best for the child. So I'd say like really just listening. I really just want to like be quiet and listen to their perspective and then try to be able to support in that way.
It sounds so simple, but it's so important. Like
Hmm.
listening can take you
Hmm.
really far. Like you said,
Right.
like we're very, most of our field is very type A, we want to get
Yeah.
in there and get things
Yeah.
done. But sometimes just like taking a step back, looking at the whole
Hmm.
picture, the whole child, the
Hmm.
whole team can like
Hmm.
really just kind of set things off to a really great start as far as collaboration goes.
Yeah.
Allison, this has been an amazing, amazing talk. I learned so much. Like,
Right.
yes. So, how can people find you, learn more from you, and the small talk girls and small talk babies? How can they
Yeah.
learn more?
So you can definitely follow us on Instagram. That's where we have a lot of our like strategies on there. So that's Club Small Talk. And then our website, smalltalktherapeutics.com. That's where we're going to try to be adding more resources on there. But we have information about neurodiversity affirming practices and Gestalt language processing on there. And then like families can reach out to us via email, via Instagram if they're interested.
Awesome. Well, thank you so, so much. I really appreciate it and hope you have a great day.
Yeah, thanks for having me.